All right. It is 6:30 now, so y'all bow your heads with me. Let's open with a word of prayer. Father God, thank you. We humbly gather here this evening. We are so happy to be in your presence, to be surrounded by fellow believers, to have your wisdom and your holy word with us to edify us. God, we ask that you would move among us this evening, that what's done this evening would build us up, would make us better Christians, would sharpen our minds towards your service. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So a crew of painters were hired to paint the steeple of a new church. And the steeple was enormous. It's a gigantic steeple, and it reaches up way, way high up into the sky, and the crew was going to have to get this special equipment to even get somebody up there to paint it. And the foreman's looking the thing over, and he says, you know what, guys, I don't think anybody can really see up that high. So let's, instead of using all of this paint to cover it, because it is a massive steeple, just thin it out. And then put some paint thinner in there. And he said, let's just get a coat on it. Nobody's really going to be able to see it. Let's just thin it out. So they do the job. They save a little bit of money there. It takes hours to do. They've got the guy up in the little bucket truck with all the harness and everything. But as they're finishing, the guy's coming down, and they all get down on the ground, and now they can't really see it up there. A storm rolls in. The sky gets black, it starts raining, and then it starts pouring. And sure enough, the thinned out paint on that steeple starts to run, and it starts to streak, and it doesn't look like it's going to hold up that well. And the foreman's looking at the whole thing. And when the rain stops, he says, you know what, I don't think it's worth it. You really still can't see up there. I can tell there's some paint on it. Nobody's going to notice the minor details. And he's about to tell his whole crew, pack it up, let's go. The job's done. We'll just invoice them for everything, and it's all going to be fine. But right as he says that, the clouds part, and a single shaft of sunlight comes down on the steeple, and they hear this loud voice from the heavens saying, repaint, repaint, and thin no more. Now, there we go. All right, so 1 Samuel 21. So we remember where 1 Samuel 20 ended. Yeah, that was Jonathan in his wonderful little archery exhibition with the poor child running out in the middle of the field, and Jonathan shooting arrows all around him, communicating to David that his father really does have it out for him. They meet in the middle of the field. They hug. They kiss. They say, I love you, man. My house will take care of your house forever. However this thing works out. And then David up and leaves. And Jonathan takes his artillery and his lad, and they go back into the city to go back to their business. 1 Samuel 21, verses 1 through 3. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or what there is present. So David departs. He leaves. Jonathan leaves the company of his closest friend, and he flees from the murderous intent of King Saul, and he's scared for his life, as one would be with the king of the country you're living in after you. Now this is the same boy that faced lions and bears and Goliath, but now he's afraid of a single man. And it boils down to it's because David recognizes that unlike a bear, or unlike a lion, or unlike Goliath the giant, though they are formidable opponents, they were not God's anointed. King Saul is God's anointed. He's not some Philistine blaspheming against the armies of the living God, and he's not some animal who's rolled up into the herd. He is king. And God placed him on the throne. And the same humility that David demonstrated in his reluctance to marry into the king's house. He didn't want to marry the daughter because it was no small thing to be married into the king's house. You see that same humility doubly demonstrated here. Who is he to raise a hand in retaliation or even defense against God's anointed, against the king? So he is rightly afraid for his life because there is ill intent, but in this case, he does not feel like he is justified in any way to raise a hand to his own defense here. So he flees. But before he makes his way out of the country, he stops in Nob, a city that in Isaiah 10:28 through 32 tells us it's just a day's walk south of Geba, where the school of the prophets was. So he's not completely out of the country. He's just on his way. He's walking south. The day's gone by, and he finds himself at Nob. And he goes there to confer with the priest Ahimelech. And that somebody who probably was a friend to David, somebody that I'm sure he's dealt with previously. Ahimelech recognizes him. David goes to him directly for provisions here. So they have a relationship. And he's hoping that now, like these other times, he might be able to give him some kind of help on his journey. He might be able to get food, get provisions, get supplies, even seek an oracle from God, from the priest here. And it says, Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David and immediately asked why he was alone. And when it says alone, it doesn't really mean alone. David has servants with him. He has a small group of men that were loyal to him, that wouldn't have any place being left behind, especially with King Saul after David. He would also be after David's servants at the very least to try and find out where David is. So he took them with him. But Ahimelech looks at him and says, why is there no royal escort with you? What's up? It shouldn't just be you. You are the general, more or less, of the king's army. You are the premier soldier of his military campaigns. You always have a procession with you. When you leave the city, when you come back from the city, they're always greeting you, but it's always in a procession. You go out and you fight all these battles with the Philistines on behalf of Saul. Why are there no other officers or members of the royal house with you now? And the fact that he was afraid kind of betrays that he has a sense of what might be going on here. Because he's a priest. He's got friends. He's got friends in the royal house. He's got people that hear things. He's probably heard about Saul openly talking to everybody about killing David. He's probably heard that there's some bad blood between them and how the king is now prone to violent fits. He's in that inner circle as a priest. You can't keep servants from talking about those kind of things. So when David shows up at his door with no royal backing, Ahimelech seems to kind of know what's going on. He's afraid because he doesn't want to turn David away, but at the same time, giving him aid may very well put him in the middle of some drama that he doesn't want to be a part of. And David tells Ahimelech he's on a secret mission for the king. He says, I had to leave in haste. It's a secret mission, and I was told not to tell anybody about what I'm doing. So he lies. In his desperation, he completely fabricates a story to at least, see himself fed and equipped before he's off. And truth be told, his desperation leads him into far darker actions than just lying here in a little bit. But David's exile here begins a very dark time in his life. But for now, he's just trying to get a little bit of help and get out on his way. So he tells the priest that he's on a secret mission and that he appointed his servants to attend this mission with him. And then he asks Ahimelech, he says, whatever provision you can spare, hey buddy, how about 5 loaves? Whatever you've got on hand will be great. Verses 4 through 6. And the priest answered David and said, there is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days. Since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the shewbread that was taken from before the Lord, to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. So Ahimelech answers David, I kind of imagine it like like an old Jewish baker or something like, what is this, a bakery? What do you think you're doing here? I'm a priest. I don't sell bread. I don't have bread just laying around. There's no common bread here. I've got bread for you to just come in and take. I've got shewbread. And y'all remember the shewbread we talked about that we had in the Holy of Holies in the inner sanctum of the temple there. They had the ark. They had an incense. They had a table with 12 loaves of shewbread stacked on top of it, one loaf for each of the tribes of Israel, and it would be swapped out on a weekly basis. So he tells David, all I've got is the hallowed bread. It's the bread described in Leviticus 24:5. It says, and thou shalt take fine flour and bake 12 cakes thereof, 2/10 deals shall be in one cake. It was baked fresh every Sabbath. It was placed in the tabernacle. The law of Moses said that this bread could only be eaten by priests because it was most holy, and that is, it's not just descriptive. That was a classification. That was its actual designation, because there were holy things and there were most holy things, and the bread was a most holy thing. And Ahimelech is open to giving him that bread, which leads us to believe that the law was probably somewhat loosely adhered to at this time. But he did draw a line. He said, you and your boys can have some as long as you at least have kept yourself apart from women or from relations, as long as you're not unclean. And David, he says, you know what, man, we've been hiding out in like the rock. You remember what we said it was probably a rocky structure, the stone that was named Ezel, I believe, Ezel, something like that. And he was hiding out there for 3 days while Jonathan was feeling out the temper of King Saul. So we find out that they've all been hiding out for 3 days. So David wasn't hiding out alone. He actually had his boys with him here. He says, yes, I can vouch for these guys. They're clean. They haven't been with women. They haven't been at home. They haven't been with their wives. They haven't done anything like that because they've been with me for the last 3 days. We've all been in hiding right here. So he gives them some details there about the fact that he's got a band of people with him, and since they only took enough food for their immediate provision when they began hiding, they're probably really hungry by now. And David says, not only are we clean, and it's it's kind of a clunky turn of phrase that we have there where it says, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. What he's saying there is that not only are the guys clean, their bags are so clean that even if you put common bread in there, we could consider it sanctified. Everybody's clean. Don't worry about it. But he says, we're about to depart on a journey, and we really need some provision. So Ahimelech gives the bread to David and to his companions. And this is exactly the scenario, the account that is referenced by Jesus himself on the Sabbath when his disciples are walking along and they're plucking grain, and the Pharisees are talking to them. In Matthew 12, verses 3 through 4, it says, but he said to them, have ye not read what David did when he became hungry, he and his companions, how he entered the house of God, and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but for the priests alone. So when Christ was confronted about the Sabbath and about his disciples plucking heads of grain and rubbing them together in their hands and eating because they were hungry from traveling so far, and then Christ even heals a withered hand in the temple on that Sabbath, and they attack him and say, you're doing work on the Sabbath. And he goes, don't you guys know your scripture? Don't you remember David when he was hungry? Him and his men took the hallowed bread because they were hungry there. The Sabbath is not for me, it's for y'all. The Sabbath is for y'all. It's not for the delight of God, it's for y'all. Verses 7 through 9. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. And David said unto Ahimelech, and is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapon with me, because the king's business required haste. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there is none like that. Give it to me. So, verse 7, the author goes out of his way to add in a little snippet of information right there before moving on with the rest of the account. Watching this whole exchange, witnessing Ahimelech supply David with bread, there's a man named Doeg, an Edomite, one of the chief herdsmen of King Saul. He's there in some kind of employment capacity under the priest dwelling there, probably helping with the animals. We don't know, but if he's the chief herdsman, it would make sense that he's there helping with the animals. And then that's all the author says, and he just keeps on going. So David, seeing Doeg, knowing that he's probably going to go and report everything he sees to Saul, feeling a little vulnerable, a little under-equipped, he asks Ahimelech, he says, do you have any weapons? Like he's going to have weapons. He said, do you happen to have sword, spear, shield, anything like that here? Because I had to leave in haste. The mission I was given was so important, I had to leave immediately, and King Saul wouldn't let me go home and properly equip myself. That's why we need food, and I don't have any weapons here. So he's building on the lie a little bit. And regardless, he asks the priest for any weapon that he might have on hand, and the priest Ahimelech says, yeah, we've got a weapon. We have the sword that you used to slay the giant Goliath. And you remember he hit him right there with the stone. He fell face forward, and then David went up, drew his own sword, and cut his head off with it. And we from Scripture, it seems to say the stone may not have killed him, but just put him out. But actually cutting the head off is what slew Goliath there. And it's interesting, too, because in that account in 1 Samuel, when he slays Goliath, you know, we get measurements for the armor, we get measurements for the spear, we get weights and all sorts of stuff, but we're not told anything about the sword itself. I would imagine it's a larger than average sword, just because the spear was like twice as big as a normal spear, and the armor was so heavy, and it would look weird if he's just, you know, got like a little letter opener on his hip compared to everything else that he's got there. So I'd imagine it's a little bigger, but even still, not something that David wouldn't be able to take and wield. And Ahimelech says it's wrapped up in a cloth. It's behind the ephod. You remember you brought it here as an offering to God to give him praise for the victory that he gave you against the Philistines. So we've still been sitting on that because we've got no other use for it, but it's wrapped up in a cloth over there. So if you want that, yeah, you can have that. Nobody's using it. And David says, awesome. That is a unique, well-made sword. There's none like it. I will absolutely take that. And David and his men took the bread, took the sword, and packed up. And then David did something completely unexpected. Verses 10 through 15. And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said unto him, Is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them, and he feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have ye brought him to me? Have I need of madmen, that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall his fellow come into my house? So maybe it's because he saw Doeg. Maybe it's because he knew that his movements would be reported, and felt that Saul was going to be just hot on his trail as soon as that spy went back and reported everything. But fearing Saul, David went down to Gath. And what is Gath? That's Philistine territory. That's Goliath's hometown. He is Goliath of Gath. David's fear of Saul is driving him into the arms of Saul's enemies to seek refuge. And I don't know of any real modern parallel that would easily convey just how wild this is. It would be like the SEAL Team 6 member that killed Osama bin Laden getting crossed with President Obama and fleeing to Saudi Arabia in the Middle East for protection. It's insane. And what's really amazing here is verses 11 and 12. David goes straight to Achish, one of the Philistine lords, and it says, as soon as they get there, the servants say, is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another, Saul has slain his thousand, David? And then David laid up these words in his heart. He's received by servants who recognize him. And they say, wait a minute, isn't this the guy that cut off Goliath? Yeah, this is the guy that cut off Goliath's head. The guy the Israelites are always singing about as though he were ruler of their kingdom. The guy who butchered 200 Philistines for his own wedding dowry. The guy who's been beating us senseless over and over and over in all of Saul's military campaigns. This looks a lot like that guy. I think it is. And verse 12 says, David laid up these words in his heart and was sore afraid. Laid up these words in his heart. That conveys the message. He's hearing this for the first time. He had no idea he was famous in Gath, or infamous as it is. He had no idea that the silly songs that I'm sure he just wrote off, that the women are singing about him back home in his hometown, had made their way to Gath of all places. They're singing that here. Be like something from our top 40 playing in Saudi Arabia or something like that. You go over there, they're singing that here. That's nuts. He had no idea he was marching into a nation and a city that was well aware of his history with the Philistines. And he apparently thought he'd just march in there and talk to Achish and make a case for sanctuary or a job, something without them ever, without ever getting a background check done on him. So David hears the servants talking, hears that they recognize him. He starts thinking, man, this may not be a good idea. So what do? Because you're already in the heart of the beast at that time. You're behind enemy lines. You're walking into the court of the leader of the people you've been butchering for years. So what's your play? For David, it is pretending to be stark raving mad. He feigned himself mad in their hands, too. In their hands. That means they have more or less arrested him. They have seized him. That's not just a figure of speech. Chapter 22, what we're about to read here, begins with describing his escape. It used the word escape. So he is in their custody. And things are really starting to look bad. And figuring that he's not going to be able to talk his way out of this, David starts acting absolutely bonkers. He scratches and he pounds on the gates of the city and he drools and he lets the spit fall down into his beard, which you don't do in the Middle East. And anytime you see that, there's a spot in the Old Testament where it says, and we captured them and we shaved off half their beards and we sent them back and we plucked them. You do something to their beards, and that's a dishonor. That's harsh. You don't do that. For him to desecrate his beard by letting his bonkers spittle run down into his beard, it's saying he's pulling out all the stops here. He's probably rolling around in the dirt and ripping off his clothes, doing whatever. Whatever he does, he puts on a real good show. And when the Lord of the Philistines comes out, he takes one look at David and he says, this guy is a madman. He is nuts. Why are you servants wasting my time with this? Don't I have enough madmen here in Gath? You got to start bringing more into me here. What am I going to do with this guy? So he sends David away. He buys the act. And David was spared. And it had such an impact on David. And this is the really interesting part about 1 Samuel. There are psalms specifically that will begin saying the title of exactly what's happening in 1 Samuel here. So if you read Psalm 34, the title of that psalm is a psalm of David when he pretended badness before Abimelech, who drove him away and he departed, or praise for deliverance from trouble. And Psalm 34 says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. O fear the Lord, yea, his saints, for there is no want to them that fear him. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. Come, ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. And it goes on from there to say that the Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. It talks about his enemies and the deceitfulness on their lips here. And actually, I think that's the next one. Yeah, that's the next one. This one is more talking, is just the fear. So this one is a psalm that he wrote inspired by the fact that in his time of great fear, when he had planted himself firmly within enemy territory, when they had seized on him and the king was about to come in for his reputation and execute him, that God, albeit through David's bonkers act that he put on, saw fit to save him, and that God is properly the one that you should fear. Fear the Lord, yea, ye saints, for there is no want to them that fear him. That's the popular line that most of us know from Psalm 34. Actually, Bree, I wish Bree was here. She can quote that one. And then Psalm 56. Psalm 56 is to the chief musician upon Jonathan el-Rechokim, Michtam of David, when the Philistines took him in Gath. Be merciful unto me, O God, for man would swallow me up. He fighting daily oppresseth me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up, for they be many that fight against me, O thou most high. What time am I afraid? I will trust in thee. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Every day they wrest my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather themselves together. They hide themselves. They mark my steps when they wait for my soul. Shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? When I cry unto thee, then shall my enemies turn back. This I know, for God is for me. In God will I praise his word, and the Lord will I praise his word. In God have I put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. So two Psalms of David, Psalm 34 and Psalm 56, inspired and written by his rescue, that he does accredit to the divine, to God being faithful to him, that he put himself in such a horrible predicament and was able to be delivered out of it. And that's... The deception. And something like that, the lies, I would say it's deception at that point. It's not an outright lie, unless he would look at him and say, I'm crazy, let me go. To act in a certain way, I feel less morally conflicted about him acting like that and them assuming madness from it and letting him go than I would. I completely condemn him looking at a Ahimelech and saying, give me food and supplies because I'm on a secret mission.
Well, I was kind of tying this two.
Tying the two together? Could God? Yes, he absolutely could. Because anything is in God's power to do something like that.
He faced that giant and he wasn't afraid at all.
No, but even in that situation, God equipped him with the sling, with his accuracy, with the bravery that he had, the tools to overcome that situation. Who's to say that being able to act, to be in drama club, Israeli drama club when he was a teenager or something like that is not paying off finally? I don't know. It seems the wherewithal to feign madness at some point like that is in itself an equipping, that wit. And we see one of the more controversial parables of Christ is the steward that the owner finds out he's being poorly managing the money and he's about to be fired. He tells him he's about to be fired. And the steward says, all right. And he goes out to all the people that owe the owner money. And he says, how much do you owe? They say 8 bushels. He says, write down 4. All right, just remember me when I'm without a job. And he does that to 2 or 3 of the people that he does business with. And then Christ doesn't come out and condemn the deceitfulness. But the parables in general, they're not the allegories that we make them out to be all the time. Usually they're told with just one specific message in mind. And the specific message from that one is, you should be shrewd sometimes. And it says that the people of this world are far shrewder than the followers of Christ within it. And you should be harmless as doves, but wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Yeah. So in something like this, I think the emphasis should be more on the guile, the craftiness of David than on the deceit there, because again, I don't think categorically lying like that. They've made some assumptions that maybe they shouldn't have, but maybe the staff psychiatrist wasn't in the house that day, and then he had the day off or something. 1 Samuel 22. See, that was a short chapter. Verses 1 and 2. David therefore departed thence, and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. So, being declared insane, the king turned him loose. David escaped the situation, escaped the custody that they had there. They let him go. They didn't beat him, they didn't kill him, they didn't imprison him, and because of his deception, he escaped that danger, and he flees from Gath to a cave called Adullam, which is really, it's a large cave structure in the Valley of Elah. And the Valley of Elah is the large area where he faced off with Goliath in that Philistine war that they had here. So there are a lot of cave structures around there, and he's found one, and he's hiding in it. And you wouldn't think that gossip gets back to his house from a cave. It's more likely that David sent word to his family and told them where he was, because it wouldn't be long before David being gone, the wrath of King Saul would spill out onto David's family, trying to find out where David is. Surely he's been in contact with you, and they were in danger. So he decides to secure his own family. They come over there, they join him, and they're joined by a few others, because it seems like life under King Saul has turned out for the normal people to be exactly what Samuel said it would be. And you remember in 1 Samuel chapter 8, it says, when you put a king in charge, he will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots, to be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and of fifties, and some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, to make implements of war and the equipments of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards, olive orchards, give them to his servants. He'll take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers. He'll take your male servants and female servants and the best of your men, a tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. Now, we're not detailed that all of that is playing out, but it looks like life is hard, because it's not long before these discontented people, these people that are in distress, that are in debt, that don't like life under King Saul, start making their way over to the cave at Adullam. As word spread that people were gathering behind the banner of David, the people's hero, you remember the face of the army, the one that would be marching in every time they would have a military victory, and to all the women singing his songs. 400 people have gathered here. And in the next chapter, it's up to 600. And it keeps quoting the number of men. This is only accounting for men. It'd be sensible to think there's just as many women and probably some children in tow. So he might have a couple thousand people in his care in one of these caves. Verses 3 through 5. And David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in hold. And the prophet Gad said unto David, Abide not in the hold, depart and get thee into the land of Judah. Then David departed and came into the forest of Hereth. So David's getting this following, and he's all too aware of how dangerous his life has become, and how volatile and how transient his life is going to be in the foreseeable future. So he takes his parents, because they are a little older and not fit for the road, not fit for packing up in the middle of the night if you get word that somebody's coming after you to attack or something like that. Hiding in caves, living in caves, dodging spears being thrown at him. So he goes to the king of Moab, and he asks him to make a place for his parents to protect them while he's on the run from King Saul, because Moab is no friend of Saul's, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So he goes over there and he says, hey, can you do this? And he's not beholden to Saul. They're not going to turn David's parents over to King Saul, because they don't like him. And the king of Moab is gracious enough to provide shelter for David's parents. But while David is there in the stronghold, in the watchtower of Moab with the king of Moab, he gets a visit from the prophet Gad. And Gad had probably come to David from Samuel's school of prophets. Whether he remained with David from that time forward to give counsel, we don't really know. In 1 Chronicles 21, verse 9, Gad is referred to as David's seer. And in the last year of David's reign, he announced to him the punishment which would fall upon him from God on account of his sin from numbering the people. And according to 1 Chronicles 29, he also wrote some of the acts of David. So Gad is a prophet, a legitimate prophet that comes to David and is in his service off and on as we go through the saga of King David here. Verses 6 through 10. When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him, now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having a spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? That all of you have conspired against me, and there is none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse, and there is none of you that is sorry for me, or showeth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So Saul has heard what's going on with David, that he's gathering a gathering of people discontent with his kingdom, and it's getting larger and larger, and he convenes a council of his servants and officials here. And he held this council in Ramah under a tamarisk tree, a giant branching tree with dense foliage and it's coverage from the sun, something that you could meet under it, a natural place for meetings. And instead of a scepter in his hand, Saul resides over his council with a spear in his hand. It's not a symbol of peace and wisdom. It's a symbol of strength, a symbol of power here. And he walks around with that spear all the time. That's why it would always be in his hand whenever David would hack him off, and he'd end up throwing the thing. And of all the people that he has gathered there, he calls out the Benjamites. In verse 7 it says, Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites. Is the son of Jesse going to give you all this stuff? Is he really going to save you from this situation? And he calls out the Benjamites because David was a Benjamite. And Saul felt that the ones most likely to flock to David, to leave him and join under David's banner, would be David's fellow Benjamites. So he calls them out directly. And he says, reality check, guys. Do you think the son of Jesse, this lowly shepherd, is going to give you all fields and vineyards and give you office and make you captains over hundreds and captains over thousands of men? Because that, the implication being that David doesn't even have that many men. He can't make you captains over such numbers. He can't give you anything because he's hiding out in the middle of nowhere. And he pretty much accuses all of them there of conspiring against him, of knowing that Jonathan was in league with David, and he throws a little pity party there, and he says, none of you feel sorry for me, and y'all don't know how hard it is. None of you know what it's like to be king and to have the people that you trust just rise up against you all the time, and it really sounds kind of sad. And while he's going on and on and on, Doeg the Edomite, that name that I told y'all to remember because it's just thrown in and then the story goes on, that Doeg raises up and he says, My king, I saw David. I saw him seeking refuge and aid from Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and I am afraid to say Ahimelech gave him bread and provisions and inquired of the Lord on behalf of David. Now that's not expressly said when David's there. He may have gone there, and that may have happened, but it's not expressly mentioned in chapter 1, and some think it's a complete fabrication on behalf of Doeg, because David's psalm here, he wrote Psalm 52 about this specific exchange. It mentions the deceitful tongue of and the other two things he reports actually happened. So he says they gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine to help him on his journey, and the underlying tone here is that all of this was done in defiance of you. So Psalm 52, and it's just 9 verses here, says, it opens the title, To the Chief Musician Mashiel, a Psalm of David, when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul and said unto him, David is come to the house of Ahimelech. Why boasteth thou? No. Why boasteth thou thyself in mischief, O mighty man? The goodness of God endureth continually. Thy tongue devises mischiefs like a sharp razor working deceitfully. Thou lovest evil more than good, and lying rather than to speak righteousness. Selah. Thou lovest all devouring words. O thou deceitful tongue, God shall likewise destroy thee forever. He shall take thee away, and pluck thee out of thy dwelling place, and root thee out of the land of the living. Selah. The righteous also shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches, and strengthened himself in his wickedness. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever. I will praise thee forever, because thou hast done it, and I will wait on thy name, for it is good before thy saints. So he talks a lot in there about deceitfulness, working deceitfully. The tongue deviseth mischiefs. That's hard to say. And the reason he says that is because of the three things that Doeg reported. He says he gave him bread, gave him a sword, and then called on God. Well, we know two of those for sure happened. For him to be accusing him of something deceitful, we kind of think maybe Ahimelech did not inquire of God on David's behalf, and Doeg is making that up just to kind of stir the pot and make himself more important in Saul's eyes and make this a bit more of a salacious report. Verses 11 through 15. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, and that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. So when Doeg speaks up and he outs Ahimelech, Saul's furious. Saul's just seeing red here. And he summons not just Ahimelech. He says, I want all of the priests here. I want Ahimelech and all of his house. I want all of those priests, everybody that's in Nob right here, because Saul's worst insecurities have just been stoked. Doeg's report just rubbed salt in Saul's worst wound, because his insecurity is that all these people he trusted are betraying him. How's he ever going to keep the throne if everybody keeps betraying him? And he almost deep down, I'm sure, feels that Samuel betrayed him by saying that God is going to rip the throne away from you and give it to somebody better than you. He can't stand the constant betrayal that he's seeing. That's all that Doeg's report is about. And they all of the priests, they all obey. They dutifully gather at Saul's council there at the same place. And Saul says to the group of priests, Which one of you is the son of Ahitub? And Ahimelech says, Here I am, my lord. And Saul says, Why? Why have you conspired against me by giving bread and a sword to the son of Jesse, and inquiring of God on behalf of my enemy who is intent on rising up against me, and now lays in wait somewhere out there in the wilderness to dethrone me? And the inquiry of God seems to be the thing that Saul detests the most, and it's the only charge that Ahimelech directly answers, because yeah, absolutely he gave him bread and a sword. That's not being disputed here, but that charge of him inquiring on God, again, it seems like Doeg's making that up, because that's the one thing that Ahimelech seems to directly respond to. But at first, he very calmly says, Wait a minute. This is David we're talking about, you know? He's your son-in-law. He's the most faithful servant in all your house. He's honorable, and he does every little thing you ask him. It's David that you're talking about here. And do you think that would have been the first time that David had me inquire on his behalf? Even if I did it, he's in there. I would see him pretty regular when he's going out on his war campaigns. I didn't just begin doing this on that day. I'd see him all the time on every one of these little expeditions. That's what it says in verse 15. Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? You think I just started this? I did not then just begin doing this for him. I would inquire of God on David's behalf regularly. Far be it from me to conspire against the king. I don't have any idea what you're talking about with this whole laying in wait business. All I did was help out David, and I'm pretty sure that's one of your most trusted servants. Verse 16 through 19. And the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, Turn and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, Turn thou and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep with the edge of the sword. So Saul wasn't going to hear any of Ahimelech's explanation. He was convinced that the priest was complicit in plotting against him, and if he was doing it, then all of his house was guilty as far as Saul was concerned. If they're not, then let this be a lesson to everybody else that would consider betraying me like this. And he turns to his footmen, and it means the runners. It's the ones who would run beside his chariot as he would go along. And he says, I want y'all to turn around. I want you to slay every one of the priests, because they are in league with David, the king's enemy. But the footmen won't do it. They wouldn't dare do it. They know David. They've probably even fought with David. They probably like David. And Saul's telling them to cross a big line here. Slay the priest, because they've been consorting with this guy that you're all buddies with. And seeing them disobey, I'm sure that made Saul all the more angry. And so David has risen against him, and now his lowly footmen are defying him. Is there anybody in this house that's still going to do the commands of their king? So he turns to Doeg, the herdsman, the Edomite, which again, Edom's a nation that's been at odds with the Israelites for generations. Doeg he's one of lower station. He's one who might be a little ambitious, looking to score some points with the king. And Saul turns to Doeg and says, slay all of these priests. And he does it. And he doesn't do it alone, obviously, because there's 85 of them. So Doeg, being the chief herdsman, probably has some salty herdsmen there with him. And he carries out the execution of 85 priests of God, men in bright white linen ephods, scattered across the ground, stained in blood now. And after that horrific deed was done, Saul turned him to the city of priests to finish the job. He treated the innocent city and its inhabitants as cherem, which is the last time we've seen that specific phraseology, if I remember right, was Jericho, a city dedicated to destruction, under the ban. A slaughter of innocent blood like no other event in the life of Saul happened here. And it's interesting, too, when you, through Jewish tradition, through the Jewish rabbis on their writings here, they don't have a good opinion of Doeg. It's Jewish tradition that he was ultimately, how do they say it? Beset by 3 devils, and each of them had a different aspect of his life that they would curse him for the rest of his life as he went along. And again, that's not scriptural. That's what the Jews hold generationally as they go through. Verses 20 through 23. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar showed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priests. And David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. Abide thou with me. Fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life. But with me thou shalt be in safeguard. So killing 85 people is a big chaotic job. And in the turmoil of that slaughter, they miss one. Ahimelech's son Abiathar escapes. escapes somehow in all that confusion, and he makes his way to David, and he tells David everything that's happened. And I picture this guy rolling up into David's camp with his own white linen ephod covered in blood, the blood of his brethren, making it to David's camp, barely any breath in his lungs, and hitting his knees and trying to tell David everything that's happened here, and managing just to barely get the words out that, "You won't believe it, David. Saul has killed all the priests. He fell down on the city. Nob is gone. All the women, the children, the animals, they're all gone." And David blames himself. And it had to be painful. He saw Doeg. He knew his presence might cause trouble. But knowing, short of slaying Doeg, what are you going to do? You're going to kill the guy to keep him from going and running and something he might do? So what could David really have done in that? But that doesn't keep him from blaming himself here. He still feels responsible. And he tells Abiathar, he says, "You know what, man? I am responsible for the fall of your whole house." And he's essentially saying, I can't make that right. I can't repay you, but your life is under my wing now. We have the same enemy. Saul killed your whole family, killed your whole city. He's after me too. As long as I am alive, you have someone protecting you. You will have a place right here in my camp, and I can't make up for everything else, but at the very least you have a place now, and you're not going to be wandering out in the wilderness. I'm going to do whatever is within my power to keep you safe. And that's 2 chapters. Whew. I need something to drink. I'm getting like, what's that? Oh, no, I'll get some. Don't you worry about me. Prayer requests. I don't have a list. That's Mom's job. Yes, ma'am.